So I am in the midst for the past 4 or 5 days of a cardiac arrhythmia, and what happens is my prefrontal cortical area kind of disconnects, thinking I'm having anxiety. I'm not having anxiety, but my memory is impaired, so I'm going to read, in large. This is a very different presentation on Trump, indeed, but and I'm thinking more in terms of 3 historical times. One, 1897, the letter where Freud announces to Fliess that he's discovered essentially the Oedipus, which he didn't present publicly till 1910 or 1911, I'm not sure which. So I'm interested in that time and the way he comes to that and how this imparts to our notion of what health is. And then the third date is in 33 when he announces that psychoanalysis doesn't require a Weltanschauung that's independent of everything but a scientific Weltanschauung. So, how did I get involved? How did I get involved with Trump? Some disclosure. It was very clear from the start, after the years of attempting to alienize Obama, and that time when he shows up and begins attacking the Mexicans, that something was clearly wrong with him. Yeah, that was pretty clear from the start. Okay. So soon afterwards, Bill Dougherty in Minneapolis began circulating a manifesto about the dangers of Trumpism, and about 12,000 people signed it. I signed it. Yeah, so it's a long manifesto, and I'm not going to read the manifesto. I began voicing my sense on his Citizen Therapist page that it was also okay to talk about Trump himself. Yeah, there's a Goldwater rule which says since 1970-something, although on the 1964 campaign, that you aren't supposed to talk about people publicly. Yeah, unless you have evidence. But there was an equally impelling Tarasov ruling which said you had a responsibility to warn people. I concluded that this DJT dude might be dangerous, and Tarasov required that it was my duty to warn and protect. Even the writers of Leviticus, though, Leviticus 19:16, that's a mistake. Leviticus 19:16 says, and it's kind of interesting because it's a sentence divided by the cantillation in 2 parts. So the first half is the major part of it. The first quarter is don't go loose-lipped among your people. And this was carried on into Talmudic times where somebody said something after 22 years was thrown off a court. And confidentiality, privacy, very important. The second quarter of the sentence says, don't stand idly by as your friend bleeds. Don't stand on the blood of your neighbor, literally. And the second half of the sentence, and this always impressed me, is I am God. Somehow this, in the recognition of this tension between these 2 poles, between Goldwater and Tarasov, if you will, there's something about goodliness, if not godliness. In any case, I was expelled from Citizen Therapist discussion with a call, an ultimatum from this very dour and definite Dr. Dougherty, as I call him here. Stop talking about the Tarasov decision and your need to warn people about the dangers of this man, or leave. Be gone. And so I opted to be gone. The next year I spent, I don't know, my wife's here, 51 and a half years, is rather upset. And I put together a blog which lasted throughout the election, whose title I borrowed from a Tom Lehrer song. He's talking about Werner von Braun. He told him, Nazi schmatzi, who cares where they come down? I just send them up. Yeah. So that blog went on for about a year, and a new Facebook discussion group, Free Citizen Therapists, which finally led into the Duty to Warn movement that's going on now, with marches hopefully October 16th, to talk about just how dangerous this man is. I also did some singing videos, which my family was very upset with. In my psychoanalytical, there's particularly my daughter, who's a practitioner, who said, my patients are going to see that my father has gone over the deep end. Scary Clown was a good humored old fellow who sang and spoke with an Eastern European accent. He's on Facebook, but his family was as comfortable with his videos as Don Quixote's near and dear with his tilting at windmills industry. So sometimes I dressed up like a Jewish monk, and other times as Che, but my daughter kept knowing it was me, my youngest child. But back to history. So 33. 80 years ago, to polemic against religion and politically based theories like Fenichel. Fenichel was going socialist, and Freud didn't want to be aligned with anyone who was in a particular movement. So he asked, does psychoanalysis lead to a particular Weltanschauung, to a particular worldview? In answering this question, the negative, he claimed to be choosing science over illusion and emotion. You know? His new psychotherapy would, if Freud had his way, rely on no assumptions whatsoever about the good life, but would instead rely solely on scientific methodology, on close and clear-minded examination of the observable. Well, not quite, because he's talking about things that, at that time, the assumption was, you bring a patient in, the interpretations will be the same. It doesn't matter who the analyst is. It just doesn't matter. In 39, Glover, in his famous paper on inexact interpretation, says, you know, maybe that's not so. And nowadays, of course, we believe differently. But free association, abstinence, and neutrality. No postulates to be proffered at all. Okay. So Freud's decision on the surface seems reasonable, but you know, even mathematics depends on postulates. If you change the fifth postulate of Euclidean geometry, you get a completely different mathematics. So it's this combination of the reasonableness of your postulates. Well, what are they in psychoanalysis? I don't know. In mathematics, change hypothesis, change theory. Freud would have none of this. So let me then continue by stating my own minority opinion. In the natural sciences, perhaps that's okay. Although even there, I might argue, I'm not certain, and I'll talk a little bit about it at the end of this. Can our notions be independent of such loosely defined constructs as value, meaning, and notions of good and evil or right and wrong? I claim that in the psychological and social sciences, that's a luxury at best. Psychological theories of health are inextricably intertwined with views of the healthy polity. Put simply, health in Sparta and health in Athens must look different. They can't be the same. We raise a child in a warrior culture, we raise a child in a different kind of civil culture. Health has to mean something else. That combination of the correctness of conclusions and the reasonableness of postulates is called the locality principle in formal logic. Okay. In Freud's psychoanalysis, there would be no definitive notion of health in the individual, more or less, except for resolution of the sexual symbolic Oedipal. As far as I know, that's the notion, at least until the later reign of ego psychologists. No notion of health in the polity either. Freud would make almost no comments about this, and by this time, he'd already had the correspondence with Einstein for the League of Nations, where he said the war is inevitable. It's going to happen. But, and I think of this as a kind of Kuhnian blip in psychoanalytic history, he stayed close to his one basic principle. He reasoned that His Majesty the baby begins life with a sense that all are present to serve him. Baby comes to recognize that others do exist, but not initially at least, that they're complex beings with their own thoughts, needs, and relationships. The child relates to mom, to dad, and whoever else enters into his orbit. Freud discovered that the child's life changes dramatically when he realizes that others are subjects just like he is. And by that I mean, I call this in my writing subjects in their own right, having their own relationships, their own thoughts. By the way, in psychoanalysis, we don't give a lot of room for other people having their own thoughts and theories. I and Doris's institutes did not talk to each other. We hated each other. We called each other horrible names. And we were right across town from each other.
Can I make a comment?
Later.
Okay.
Until that time, the child understands others more or less in their capacity to satisfy his own needs. Their need-satisfying objects, their self-objects, and Covitz language. Everybody's got a word for this. I call them shadow objects. In each case, these shadow servers, glorified chambermaids, if you would, either do or don't satisfy the child's needs and is seen under this measure as either good or bad by that standard. That's the measuring device. Satisfy my needs, good. Don't satisfy my needs, fuck you. You know, you're bad, you're horrible, you're low energy, you're all those things. When the child accepts the complexity of family relationships and is able to understand that mom and dad have a relationship independent of their discussions about how best to raise this prince, has begun to embrace them as multifaceted others with their own thoughts, feelings, and relationship. Freud sees this only in terms of the sexual world. Yeah? The child comes to realize that what's going on behind the green door in the parent's life is okay. He doesn't take that other step of really saying that the child comes to embrace their relationship. And I claim this is kind of a Kuhnian blip, that this is a paradigm choice, if you would. It's a fork in the road, and Freud went one way. If all went well, Freud would say, the child develops a conscience, an Überich, a guiding eye, an over-eye, a social ego, if you would. Yeah? In understanding as well the values and vulnerabilities of these others. So here was the big question. Would emphasis be situated in psychoanalysis only on the vita sexualis, on the sense of me, normal or pathological, which pretty clearly was implicated as a central focus in learning about the parents' extracurricular activities, as well as in life during the developing years? I mean, we live in a very sexually heavy culture. You buy a car, I mean, there's a naked lady leaning against it before you buy the car. You know, would Freud place that emphasis on the structure and underpinnings of das Überich instead of the conscience of the kid's development as a progressively responsible and contributing member of a polity of mutual concern and interest? Those of you who have been interested in the early history of psychoanalysis know that Alfred Adler was pushing for this. He was saying there needs to be a community sense of responsibility. So would it be based on the child's recognition of the full subjectivity of others, which permits them to engage in the richness of their own lives, engaging a sense of us that represents his perception of you, a Buber's Ich Du. Yeah? By the way, the masters of the Talmud had this expression, my nafka mina, and it literally means, what the fuck difference does this mean? You're arguing over how many angels dance on a pin. Well, yeah, I claim it really does. Is it only a matter, and this is kind of the choice, of Charcot's prescription, which Charcot denied ever saying, we supposedly wrote a prescription for Freud, penis normalis docem repetitor, or does health relate to the transcendent ability to rejoice in others' successes? Which is it? So the healthy person, here's the simplest definition. This is the structural model laid bare. The healthy person has a capacity to recognize, and does generally recognize, his or her wishes and impulses and others' wishes and impulses with a degree of clarity. Yeah? Ego. Yeah? Further, the ability to determine whether or not the actions that would result from expressing these impulses are likely to cause avoidable damage to self or others. Uberich. Yeah, I mean, this is the superego. Is this going to hurt somebody? And then, if indeed it's determined, no, it's not going to hurt anybody, then the person has the sense of agency to be able to act on this. Yeah? And as far as I know, that's the simplest expression. Maybe controversial. Doris is here too. No. Not yet. Now the 6 habits of highly sick people. Yeah? I mean, there are lots of things that the previous speaker listed, but I would list actually 6 of them that are central. And they may still coexist with a vigorous vita sexualis, and even with economic success. Mind you, Freud's claim that health was the ability to work and to love. Now, I don't doubt, by the way, that Herr Drumpf has the capacity to have sex between the sheets, and he apparently has earned money, right? Well, we don't know for sure. So the highly sick person is generally incapable of responding in an emotionally empathic way to another. Therefore, winning may appear to be all. This is, in short, the failure to accept that others have lives and relationships independent of that child and the child's needs. So I'm talking, by the way, pre-Oedipal here. Yeah? I'm talking the distinction between pre-Uber-ich and Uber-ich. Yeah? They may make fun, therefore, of weak people, for instance. The highly sick person continues, therefore, like Freud's pre-Oedipal child, to effectively split the world into good and bad. One group serving their needs, the other not serving their needs. It's that failure that the ego psychologists called the failure of the fusion of the drives, Hartman, Chris, and Lowenstein, and each generation has had a different name for. Now, by the way, such people may not be bigoted, as they haven't actually arrived at the point where they have an allegiance to a group sufficient to induce bigotry. I'm not certain that Herr Drumpf has any problem with any colored person walking into his life as long as they have $2 billion. It's fine. His category is not based on race. I don't think so. 3, such highly sick people don't tend to evaluate whether their actions may be destructive to another, and are therefore often capable of making decisions instinctually, quickly that is, in the time it takes for an impulse to travel from the brain or spinal cord to a grabbing hand, if I may be so cavalier. I've already been pretty cavalier, so what the hell, you know. It's beginning to sound familiar. I mean, this is Trump in the primary. 4, as such, highly sick people tend not to develop a respect for others' thinking, relationships, or efforts, and they tend to invest little value in the accomplishment of others. I mean, so we see no need to respect laws. I mean, they are beyond laws. If the only thing that matters is me, I really don't need to have any attachment to laws. I think it's unfortunate that psychoanalysis hasn't looked more at the way the failure for the superego to properly develop is expressed in everyday life. I mean, I have a son who about 25 years ago was going to write a book on how the Constitution appears in everyday life. Maybe 28 years ago. How does the Uber-ich express itself? 5, due to the above, highly sick people tend to have little nuance in their thinking, cannot imagine there being multiple, not unreasonable ways to skin a cat and run a house or do anything. They may disparage others, any others who don't agree with them, or challenge these others due to the highly sick person's built-in "my will be done" syndrome. 6, highly sick people, due to all the above, and due to their equating the positive with self and right with their own impulses, cannot consistently separate wished for from reality. If the only thing that matters is winning, then the very fact that I say something makes it true. And of course, this is all consistent with the kind of behaviors that at least I witnessed in him. So I had a little epiphanous thought experiment that I think I borrowed from one of the folk singers of the 60s, kind of like, it's kind of like the Mississippi Traveler or something like that. So I'm a policeman from a plain old regular town. I was driving down the road in my police cruiser when I saw this driver, funny looking, kind old guy in an orange tint to his skin, yellow poofy hair, driving brand new Bentley. I assumed he was pretty safe, even though he's weaving just a little haphazardly, a little erratic. He had his window open, head out there like a coonhound, calling some immigrant-looking pedestrians pretty angry names. Pulled him over. He had a small arsenal of automatic weapons up front. I am beginning to think it's not whether this man is crazy, it's whether he's dangerous. I don't have to be concerned about whether a person is crazy. You know? Half the analysts, never mind. I pulled him over. He had a small arsenal of automatic weapons up front, an RPG launcher on the back seat. I asked, "What's with all the weapons, sir?" He says, "Officer, I got a license and this county is open carry." Anyhow, it's a pretty dangerous world out there. There are a lot of immigrants, and I think I saw some Muslims dancing in the park. "Okay, sir, just hold on for a moment." So I go back to my cruiser, call the station house, "Sarge, any report of dancing foreigners in the park?" Sarge asked me what I've been smoking. I understand his intent, so I go back to the car. "Sir, I cannot confirm any disturbance going on in our park." "Officer, I saw it myself, and I should know because I made a lot of money, and women tell me I'm the best under the sheets." Yeah? Have we really lived through this? Hard to argue with that, sir. Orange man then goes on talking trash about people who are different, saying that everybody who disagrees with him is a liar, and one of them might have killed a Kennedy, another one should be sent to the women's detention center because she's the world's biggest crook. Then he tells me it's not raining, and it never rains when he's riding in his Bentley. Meanwhile, the water's pouring off my Stetson. He starts swearing at the township commissioners, etc., etc. What are the choices that we have? 5 minutes, shit. 1, he can say, "Sir, you be careful now, have a blessed day." "Sir, I just want to say your car is great. Can I go for a ride?" "Sir, I think you might be batshit crazy, but I can't be sure, so have a good day and drive carefully." "Sir, take me for a ride and give me a good job and we'll forget about it." Or, "Sir, would you step out of the car and we'll take a ride and see if we can't settle down those images in your head with a little Haldol of dancing Muslims in the park. The good docs are coming and they'll take you somewhere where you can try to remember whether these Arabs weren't barefoot in the park." Sorry. Closing thoughts. I don't mean to be cavalier about this situation, about the seriousness of having a leader of the free world armed to the teeth and talking much like the orange man of the fable. Still, one more fable. I'm sitting down at a Starbucks, or a person comes into my psychoanalytical office with a pea shooter. Yeah? I ask you to further imagine that this person has all those 6 characteristics described above, and additionally here I'm using the identically same language as the orange man. In any case, imagine further that time is up on our meeting, coffee's finished. I've not administered any objective tests. The man shows no signs of anxiety except for a transient nose sniff, which was coming back in Europe. Only expressed disdain for others and exhibits no depression, assuredly no shame or guilt. He seems oriented in time and space. Still, I have a strong impression that he's suffering from a character disorder. What do I do? Do I have a responsibility to disarm him? But back to Trump. I've gone back in my mind to Leviticus time after time. It occurred to me isn't it possible that this is all an act and he's sane? Yeah, and not dangerous. So I've been in practice about 40 years. I can't say for certainty whether he believes these things. Perhaps in his heart of hearts, he has an empathic soul, doesn't split the world into with him and against him, is careful, nuanced thinker, and does indeed respect NATO. Perhaps even Mr. Trump knows the difference between alternative reality and reality and simply utilizes alternative reality as a strategic ploy. I considered this and then wondered, there have been people hurt by him. There have been a lot of people hurt by him. He humiliated lots of people. And I began looking back and still concluded that all 6 were there. Since the attacks on the Twin Tower, the presidents of our country and other countries have told us that we all have to be vigilant. This is an old thing in the Middle East. If you get on a bus and there's a package unattended, you begin screaming and hollering and you get off the bus. And you have to do something. Doris was talking about doing something. You have to hurry up. Yeah. Okay. So how do you measure it? And in measuring risk, if I can just turn mathematical for 1 second, we don't measure risk by the probability of something bad happening. We don't. And mathematicians measure it by taking the probability and multiplying it by the outcome. You know? And so if you have a 1% chance of losing $10, no big deal. You have a 1% chance of losing your house, big deal. You buy insurance. Yeah. So I won't belabor the point. In closing, be very brief. He's displayed all 6 of the signs that I and many other mental health professionals associate with severe character pathology. We now have 55,000 signatures of American mental health professionals who believe he's crazy. That is dangerous in the sense that I'm listing, not in the sense that he has anxiety or depression or any of the things that might be listed in DSM, but that he's dangerous. I do strongly agree with those people who have been diagnosing him, but I don't feel any need to diagnose him at all. I simply need to show the stigmata of a very sick, disturbed person, and I think that's very clear.
So we have 10 minutes for discussions and questions.
In ending, let me just say that I believe my ethical duty to warn, and every one of your ethical duty to warn about this is unquestionable. To warn that this person is indeed very dangerous. And I blame the whole thing on Freud for choosing the sexual, and I'll be done. Arnold Roth, about 30 years ago or something, the discovery of beta sexualis. I'm done.